Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Deck Doctor. This week we are going to be covering Green Yellow Sacrifice, which was voted on my Twitter, which is something I might start doing now, just putting up a poll on my Twitter to see what you guys would like to see in Deck Doctor. So Green Yellow Sacrifice is an interesting deck where you kill your own creatures and gain benefits from the last word effects, while buffing up your Soul Eater, which is going to be your finisher, which can grow into a really massive creature and has flying and charge free as well. So just a great strong creature, which this deck is really centered around. There's quite a few legendaries and epics in this deck, so there is a budget version at the end, so be sure to check that out. But yeah, let's go through the deck, and we'll start off with the creatures. So to kick things off, we have Bone Collector. Now, Bone Collector gains +1/+1 every time something dies next to her. And this could be an enemy creature, it can be your own creature, which is great because it's a 2 Faeria 1/3. It gathers for you, but also gets buffed up while you're sacrificing and fighting on the board. So a very strong creature that can really snowball out of control. I've seen Bone Collectors easily have double figure stats. You know, it can happen, especially if you have your Bone Collectors positioned very well, and that will be one of the things you'll want to be learning with this deck, making sure you buff your Bone Collectors as much as possible, just so they can maintain the board for you while you're trying to build up your Soul Eaters. Next up is Bloom Sprite and Elderwood Hermit. These two have last word effects. Bloom Sprite gives you a random green card. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not, but it's got a cost reduction. So if it's another body, it's just something else that can fight on board for you and get sacked as well. Elderwood Hermit's pretty cool. It gives you basically an Elderwood Embrace randomly. This can be kind of controlled by cards like Demon Wrangler, so you can make a Demon Wrangler a 4/5 and then get the 5/2 from sacking the Hermit. So it's a very nice way to put some power on some of your smaller creatures, and they can fight on board easier. Speaking of Demon Wrangler, he's up next, so just sacrifice one of your guys, you gain a 5/2. So this is really good on Bloom Sprite, because Bloom Sprite's a 1/1, you turn into a 5/2 with flying, so not only can it has a bit of mobility, it can fly over the lake tiles, maybe collect. It also has a good aggressive stat line, so it can take out threats a lot easier. So a great defensive card, and also builds with the whole synergy of the deck. Wind Soldier, kind of a no-brainer really, removal. It can collect as well, it's got a lot of mobility, and it dies as well, so it builds towards that Soul Eater. And finally, Deathwalker, one of the bulkier creatures in the deck, one of the cheaper bulky creatures in the deck as well, 6/5 with Death Touch, and you sacrifice a creature to summon it, so that's not a big deal for this deck. You want to be sacking these creatures to buff up your Soul Eater, but you also get this strong stat line creature with Death Touch as well, so it can challenge some of the bigger stuff like Beirut, for example. So let's move on to the events and see what events have been packed in this deck. So the event cards in this deck are pretty simple. We have Earthcraft, which is just going to accelerate your land to be able to play Soul Eater, because Soul Eater costs 3 forest, 3 desert. So you're not going to be able to play until turn 6 usually, but Earthcraft cycles through your deck, you get to draw more cards, and you run a lot of cheap creatures anyway, and you also get to produce land. So it's a great card for just being able to get those Soul Eaters out early, but also dig deeper into your deck for those smaller creatures to fight on board. Elderwood Embrace, just a buff, just to help these little guys turn into big guys, being able to deal with any threats coming your way. There's a lot of mid-red in the metagame and yellow archers, so I figured like Elderwood Embrace would be nice just to give your creatures a bit more health, but also to be able to challenge stuff like Axe Grinders, Fire Elementals, and Outland Rangers, very popular creatures in the metagame right now. Last Nightmare is your hard removal. The luxury of playing yellow in your decks is you get access to basically the only hard removal in the game right now. You're able to destroy big threats, which is definitely going to help, say, in the mirror match as well. You're going to be able to deal with Soul Eaters, but also in any other matchup, really, where you need to remove something that's giving you a lot of trouble. Lastly, we have Yak Attack. Now, Yak Attack doesn't feature in a lot of decks, but it works really well in this deck. You get to summon, the free 2/2 Yaks. They have haste, so they're able to collect which is another important thing. So you can even reduce the cost of this card by 3 if your yaks are positioned in a way where they can collect from free wells. Also, they fight on board, which is great. So if they die, you get the Sakura, you get the Pirate Soul Eater. You also get to remove threats. So it's kind of like a bit of removal, but you also get the added benefit of buffing your Soul Eater as well. So let's take a look at the Legendaries. So the Legendaries in this deck are Kaleem and Tephra. Now, I've spoken about Kaleem before in the Yellow Archers, and I also touched on him in even the Blue Deck Doctor episode, because he is one of the most powerful Legendaries in the game. I would even say he is the most powerful Legendary in the game. There's a lot of debate of which is the best. Is it Garadan, is it Aurora, is it Kaleem? But for me, I feel this guy is just so good. 5 Faeria, 3/6, can fly, charge, develops followers. You can sacrifice followers, and followers can also collect for you. So he has a lot of versatility in this deck, and I think he fits into it really well. But the other card that features in this deck are one of the dragons. Now, Garadan gets a lot of spotlight in Faeria, but Tephra is probably the next best dragon. And it's just a great buff. You gain a 6/6. You'll have hopefully have a lot of Faeria, because you have a lot of cheap creatures that are going to gather and eventually pay for themselves. Tephra fits really well into this deck. It just turns your little guys into really heavy hitters, and being able to fight on board or even push some lethal. And Tephra can even buff herself, so she can really turn herself into a big 11/11 flying charge threat. So another just win condition, but also a very versatile card in this deck. So last but not least, let's talk about the guy who brings this deck together, and that is the Soul Eater. So the big daddy himself, Soul Eater, a 1/1 that gains +1/+1 for each friendly creature that has died during the match. He has flying and he has charge 3, so he's a very mobile guy. But he just gets ridiculously big the longer the game goes on. And you have 3 of these guys in your deck. They are the core of this whole list. And dealing with one can be really tough. These guys easily get to about 14, 15. But even playing them as like a 6/6 for 5, like that's really good. I mean, it's a 5 Faeria 6/6 with great mobility. And gets bigger as your creatures die on board as well. So these guys also get buffed while your creatures are getting eliminated on the field, even when they've been played. So they constantly grow while combat is being dealt by your creatures on board. So yeah, this is the core of the deck. It's very hard to replace these in budget lists. So if you want to play this deck, you're gonna have to have 3 Soul Eaters. So yeah, let's take a look at the land placement. So Green Yellow Sack is a slower deck. You're going to want to be building back near your well. You want to be collecting, sacrificing, just building up some defenses until you're able to bust out the big Soul Eaters. So you're going to want to be building on the first line of tiles next to your orb on each side. Develop creatures and start collecting Faeria, and then eventually building up around the sides if you need to combat, say, a mid-red player or a blue player that's progressing too quickly. As for lands, you want to probably have your forests next to your orb, just so you can summon like the bone collectors and some of the creatures you want to die to be able to get buffed, so they can be quite good defensive tools. But most importantly, you want to have your deserts next to your bottom wells, and the reason is mainly because of Wind Soldier. If Wind Soldier needs to remove something higher up on the board and they are summoned on that spot, it'll collect from your well, and if it needs to travel all the way up, it can double collect, meaning it gets a cost reduction from 1 to 2 Faeria, which is just great for you. It's just great Faeria management to be able to play Wind Soldier that way. So let's take a look at the budget version of this deck. So I've built a budget version of this list, and it does remove some of the stronger cards in the deck, like Tephra, Kaleem, but also the Earthcraft. They're legendary and epics, so I wanted to make this deck as cheap as possible. The one card which I already said you can't really get rid of is the Soul Eater. It is the core of the deck, so they're going to be your 3 epics. But taking a look at some of the replacements here, I removed the Earthcrafts and put in the Village Elders. So just a 1/1 that draws you a card. You can sacrifice it. It kind of does the same thing as Earthcraft, apart from you don't get that land acceleration. And I've replaced the Legendaries with Version Forces, so just putting a bit of power into the deck. And Version Forces have great stats, they cost 7/7s. You can buff them as well with Elderwood and Hermit, so they can be real threats against decks that don't have hard removal. So yeah, that's the budget list. If you can't quite afford all the epics and legendaries, this deck might serve you well as a kind of a base deck while you start collecting the other pieces you need. So that's it for this episode of Deck Doctor covering Green Yellow Sacrifice. Thank you very much for watching, guys. There will be a deck pilot episode coming out as well to support this episode and show you how Green Yellow Sac is played. I haven't played a huge amount of Green Yellow Sac in my time, so it's going to be a bit of a learning experience for me as well, I believe. I know the basics of the deck, so I'm looking forward to just giving a whirl and figuring out some things myself. Of course, if you do like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more content, more Deck Doctor, more Deck Pilot, and highlights from my stream. And of course, on the side, we have our social media and of course our Twitch stream, where I stream Tuesday to Friday from 12 p.m. GMT, BST, or 1 p.m. CET, CST, depending on what time of the year it is. And yeah, you can just come in. I'll answer any of your questions. If you want to just talk about my videos, that's great. Feel free to leave any comments below if you have any thoughts on the videos, any ways I can improve, or some things you'd like to see. Thank you very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed this episode of Deck Doctor, and I'll see you again next time. Take care. Have a great day.